Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into the ProRevenge archives. Our first story today comes to us from Nope, Not Happening. Being stubborn and unreasonable is a good way to make your business fail with me. Let's jump right in. Hi Reddit, I've always wanted to share my little story, so here it is. So I own a few residential properties. I used to maintain them myself, but I have a small business that needs my constant attention. So I hired a property management company to maintain the properties. Property management companies handle everything. Fix anything broken, screen the tenants before moving in, evict them if they don't pay rent, etc. Well, I just collect my rent money minus their little reasonable fee they take each month. When I chose this company, who I'll call SPM for Crappy Property Management Company, they seem to be a very good company. Local, been established for a while, nice people, etc. I needed help marketing my properties and getting good tenants moved in, so I chose them. While most of my properties were vacant at the time, I did have a few occupied, and one tenant living in my higher-end condo property, and he was my favorite tenant, who we'll call FT. I screened him and approved him myself before I hired SPM. He was a very good tenant and he rented from me for 3 years, which is a long time and a great thing for landlords. Paid rent on time, made repairs himself without deducting rent, didn't smoke, etc. I ended up getting to know him because he wanted to buy the condo and he was a great tenant, so we became very good friends. Once I hired SPM, I had to inform my existing tenants that everything from now on would be handled by SPM and that they would need to sign a new lease. All tenants complied and everything was pretty good for about a year, just collecting my money with no issue. However, my designated representative from SPM kept changing almost every 3 months it seems like, which I should have noticed. But I had a lot more properties at this point and ended up becoming one of SPM's favorite property owners because of some of the higher rent properties. They made more money with me. They always praised how they loved doing business with me. Favorite tenant lost his job for a couple months, but he still managed to pay rent. I really appreciated that because when a tenant moves out, it's pretty costly for me, especially with this property. Not many people in this area would easily qualify for this property. So you can imagine how glad I was to find this good tenant. Well, for the month of March, which is 2 months after favorite tenant gets a new job, favorite tenant's rent check for March bounces because of an issue with his bank's overdraft. The bank showed it went through for a couple of days before it was returned. Favorite tenant has never had any sort of trouble paying rent whatsoever. My payment from SPM included favorite tenant's payment, so both me and favorite tenant had no idea of this issue until SPM notifies him of the issue about a week after the check itself bounces. So in total, it was about half a month since favorite tenant dropped off his payment. Rent for April was about to be due, so he's just now being notified about the bounced check. The check that SPM waited a week to deposit and waited another week to call favorite tenant and let him know the check bounced. So you can imagine that it's pretty hard for favorite tenant to suddenly come up with the money to pay rent and pay next month's rent. Sure enough, he can't, which I'm understanding about at first. How does SPM handle this situation? They give him only 24 hours to pay the rent in certified funds, or they would file a worthless check complaint with the state's attorney's office. Where I live, a worthless check would be a felony charge that my tenant would be facing and could face prison time if convicted. Favorite tenant tried to do whatever he could to get SPM to work with him so he could get a little extra time to come up with the money, but they wouldn't budge at all. The nasty accounting lady told him, "You committed a felony. This is policy and we have to report it. Come up with the money by tomorrow or we file charges." First of all, I know the laws. SPM should have started the eviction process like they were supposed to, which would have given favorite tenant a few days to come up with the money. A bounced check is still unpaid rent, so they should have followed this procedure. The section of the lease that states the return check policy says nothing about them filing criminal charges. So I'm completely unaware of all this until SPM calls me and says favorite tenant is moving out because his lease was up so he wasn't renewing. So I called favorite tenant to wish him the best and thank him for his long tenancy. He tells me everything SPM decided to pull as I described above. This gets me pretty mad. At the same time, I'm confused why favorite tenant didn't just call me in the first place, so I call my contact at SPM and get transferred to SPM B accountant. So the conversation goes like this. in a distressed tone, "Okay, what the hell? This is a good paying tenant I've had for 3 years and never had a single problem with until now. Why are you threatening criminal charges?" In a bitchy tone of voice, "A worthless check is a felony. He committed a felony. This is our policy. Sorry." No, you need to follow the eviction process and give him the standard 3 days to cure the unpaid rent. It's his right. He has someone that's going to loan him the money in a few days. Doesn't matter, the check bounced. It is a felony. Like I'm some effing moron. It's our policy and we will prosecute if he doesn't pay by tomorrow. Now I'm pretty furious. Let me effing tell you something. This sounds like extortion. If you file that effing charge, you will have a problem with me. I'm not losing a perfectly good tenant who fell on hard times over this crap. Don't curse at me. I will not be cursed at. We're filing the charges if there's no payment tomorrow. I tell her some more explicit words and hang up. So now I'm playing the waiting game. Favorite tenant is so distraught, he decided to move in with his parents with plans to forfeit his security deposit to repay SPM. Which I'm fine with because SPM already mistakenly paid me and he technically owed them at this point. April comes around and I notice that my rent payment had a deduction from when they mistakenly paid me. So SPM has their money back and now I'm the one that's out $2,200. So now I email SPM to see what's going on, reminding them they needed to forfeit favorite tenant's entire security deposit to reimburse me for the lost rent. SPM then tells me over email that the security deposit is favorite tenant's money and they have to give it back to him only. Total BS. So I will be paid when they get the money from the state attorney as they've kept their word on filing the charges. I ask why and how they were going to collect the money to refresh my memory. So SPM's rep explains to me over email the whole thing. How he didn't come up with the money in 24 hours, felony, our policy, etc. So now I have everything documented in email of how they used extortion on my tenant instead of following the eviction process. I don't argue, even though I'm pretty furious finding out they still filed the charge on who's now my friend when I was willing to take a loss. So now I'm extremely furious and go down to their office unannounced. I encountered Accounting B again, told her I wanted to talk with the owner. Her response was, "If this is about the whole situation with favorite tenant, you're not seeing him." I told her that's going to be a problem because I'm pulling all my properties away and switching property management companies. So I needed the keys and paperwork. Eyes widened and her voice went from B to shaky. Now the owner sits down with me and desperately tries to get me to reconsider. I highlighted what they did was unacceptable, against state laws, and they needed to drop the charges. He wouldn't do it, saying he can't because it's policy again. I told him that's BS because he doesn't technically owe them money, he owes me and I'm taking the loss. Still nothing, so I take my keys to all properties and cut all ties. But they didn't drop it for whatever reason. So now I'm on fire. I wanted to see what other trouble they've been in, so I ended up doing a little research in the county's court records. Sure enough, SPM has been sued for crappy management before and had to pay $20,000 to an apartment complex that sued them. So I contact my lawyer who helped me when I bought my first investment property, explained everything that happened, and we ended up having a meeting. We ended up taking SPM to court and filing a Board of Realtors complaint, notifying the board that SPM was being sued for their actions. To add the cherry on top, we requested the same judge who oversaw SPM's previous lawsuit. Lo and behold, there's the same judge on the stand, and he isn't pleased to see the owner's face again. They were found guilty of extortion, violating tenants' rights, and in violation of many real estate laws. Judge rules the following: worthless check charge against favorite tenant dismissed. $15,000 in damages to favorite tenant for extortion. $10,000 to me for damages and attorney fees. $8,000 in court fines for extortion, business licensing, and real estate license revoked. So now SPM is done, and the owner can no longer practice real estate again, all because they decided to be stubborn and not be ethical. To my understanding, there is another criminal case for extortion against the owner, but I haven't kept tabs on that. The office they were once in is now vacant and being offered for rent by another realtor. Favorite tenant bought a house. He may be involved with the other case, but not sure. I sold a good amount of my properties and hired an actual person to manage the properties I have remaining. Isn't it kind of madness when you talk to a manager or owner and they keep talking about their company policy and that policy can't be changed? Come on, you're in management, you decide that policy, and you have the ability to make exceptions or changes. I do have to say, OP, it sounds like your tenants are really lucky to have you as a landlord. Considering how many stories we've read on here about absolutely horrible ones, this was kind of a nice change. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Spugnacious. Completely outflanked my butthole coworker. Let's jump right in. So this just happened about 6 months ago. I got a job in a different department than the one I started in. Great job really, I really like my manager and my supervisor, but my coworker in this department is a bit weird. She's a neat freak, and you can't set or leave anything on her desk without permission. You can't touch her chair because she has back problems. She slaves all over her job and whines constantly about how much work she has. I started my role and floundered a bit. I didn't really get training and it was a struggle for a while, but I slowly got the hang of things and got pretty good at what I do. Except my coworker has decided that she doesn't like me and has started picking fights over stupid stuff. And I do mean stupid stuff. Like, if I was working on something and she needed something taken care of, she would ask me to do it, and opposed to waiting for me to finish what I was doing, she would start yelling at me. Or if I did something that annoyed her, like ask her what time she wanted to take her lunch, that would be another scream fest as she shrieked at me for not knowing what her schedule was and bothering her at her sacred desk. It got bad enough that we both got called into a meeting where our manager told us that we needed to work things out or they would make changes, and left it there. That improved things for a little while, and then she was back to where she was before. Then I realized that she was keeping a log on me of every single mistake I had ever made. Seriously? Put a box on the wrong shelf, it goes in the log. Leave a power supply out of something by accident, it goes in the log. It got to the point that she complained to my manager when she thought my clothes weren't clean enough to wear to work. We work in a warehouse, I don't wear nice clothes in my role. And I ended up having to have an embarrassing conversation with my manager. I started to retaliate by going to my supervisor whenever she flipped out on me to complain that this wasn't acceptable. We're supposed to be on the same team, and screaming at your coworkers isn't kosher. Management agreed with me, and more than a few discussions were had with her about her attitude. So the Cold War went on for a while, and to their credit, my management team tried their best to make it work. They had both of us take a conflict management resolution course. We had our conflict styles analyzed, they coached us. The thing was, they pretty much came to the same conclusion that I did. She didn't like me and didn't care if I knew it and wanted me gone. So we finally had a blow up that was bad enough that she decided it was time to break out the big guns. She took the log of my sins to our manager to show how incompetent I was. She got shot down in a hurry on that one. Apparently, keeping a mistakes log on your colleague is not considered to be a productive part of teamwork. Also, after all this went down, I finally forced her to have a discussion with me, and I just stood my ground. I told her that I'm not hard to work with, I'm glad to help out with stuff, but I needed her to be reasonable about things. Management agreed with me and gave us some suggestions that, to her credit, she attempted to partake in, and things were okay for a couple of months. Then my wife called me one day to confess to me that she'd come down with a medical problem that she has been hiding from me because she was embarrassed about it. It shook me up a bit, but I went and talked to my supervisor, and I felt a lot better afterwards. I went back to work and immediately got grilled by the coworker. Where did I go, and what was I doing? Talking with our supervisor. About what? Something private. She kept badgering me about it to the point that I had to ask her to stop and leave it alone because I didn't want to talk to her about it. Well, this pissed her off something fierce. The next day when we were working, she asked me a question about something, and when I responded, she completely lost her mind and accused me of treating her poorly and demanded to know what the problem was. I told her I had some problems at home, and if it was affecting my work, I was sorry. She told me I was full of crap, was lying about stuff to try and gather sympathy for me because I was so incompetent at my job. And that was it. It was war. I put down the equipment I'd been working with and left the room, and when I walked away, she was taunting me. "Why don't you go tell your mommy how I was mean to you?" Because she guessed correctly that I was heading right to the supervisor. Well, the supervisor was pissed off, wrote down the entire incident, wrote her up, and filled in our manager too, who was also not very impressed. As for me, the gloves were off. This bee had to go. So I picked up my perfect weapon, the job she had been dog effing around in the last few months. We'd recently gotten a huge computer upgrade in the role that she covered, and she should have been able to work a lot faster at her job. Instead, she took time pointing out all the flaws in the new system and filling her mistakes diary with all my errors and wrongdoings. One day, I even caught her taking pictures of equipment that I'd worked on. As it turns out, I'd had to cover for her a couple times, and the job she was doing did not take the amount of time she was allotting to do it. I managed to finish off an entire day of work for her in the span of 90 minutes. And the next time she took a day off, the same thing happened. 90 minutes or less for everything that would normally take her a full 8 hours. So I told my supervisor, and the next time she took a day off, she got staff from another department to cover her spot for me, and one person posted a result slightly slower than mine, and the other person was actually a little faster than I was. So now my supervisor was in agreement with me. She was dog effing, and we both knew it. Time to spring my trap. Our management team goes absolutely giddy for efficiencies. Anything that makes your work better or faster will actually get listened to and usually approved. So I sat down and wrote a proposal that essentially broke our work area down into 2 zones, one being the returned equipment area and the other being the processing and configuring area. I magnanimously offered to take all of the processing and configuring off of her plate and would allow her to deal with all of the returned equipment. On the surface, this looked like I was offering to do even more work than before, simply so that we could stop butting heads at work and be more efficient. In reality, I was offloading almost half of my entire job onto her in exchange for something that she had been screwing around with and trying to look busy doing. It went even better than I expected. I submitted my proposal to our supervisor, who loved it, and she in turn asked our manager to review it, and she thought it was excellent as well. And then they asked my colleague for her thoughts on the whole thing, and she flipped her effing lid. In email no less. And I know that because my supervisor just forwarded the original email to her, and she hit reply all to do it. She demanded that they immediately trash this idea, called me lazy and stupid, implied that she had way more seniority than me, told them that I wasn't smart enough to do her job, that I was discriminating against her, and threatened to take legal action. Management stalled on this a little bit because she was a long-time employee and she was making some very damning accusations. But my supervisor and manager had documented the litany of explosions I'd had to deal with while working with her, and all of our stories matched up. As a coup de grace, when I got called into HR to give my side of the story, I pointed out that the log and pictures she had been taken amounted to a campaign of harassment and was causing me to work in a toxic working environment. HR transferred her to another department where she proceeded to infuriate, vex, and anger anyone she worked with while being given a workload about 1/6 of everyone else in the department. After about 2 months of this, the notice came out of HR that she was no longer part of the company. No less than 15 coworkers stopped by to congratulate me for being the one to finally outlast her. As a victory party, we reorganized the working area in the back, and we got rid of her desk and chair and pictures and anything else she might have contaminated with her insane attitude. She was there almost 20 years, maxed out salary scale, 5 weeks of vacation per year, decent benefits, retirement plan, all of it. Now, she can't even use us for a reference because she left on such bad terms. I don't even want to know what she's up to because she was so unpleasant to deal with, but I can't imagine finding a new job at anything other than fast food is possible with a 15+ year gap in her resume. If you've been at a company for a really long time and you have some wonderful benefits and even a pension going forward, then maybe, just maybe, you should think about what you say before you say it or before you raise a stink at work, because you never know how quickly all of that could disappear. Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.